Welcome back everyone, this is me, your watercolor wizard, and today I'm going to be sharing with my beginners in watercolor a tip about salvaging old watercolor. Now, it might not be beginners that have to deal with old watercolor paint, but maybe you're a beginner and you are pulling out your child's watercolor paints and it looks like this one. This watercolor is maybe 10 years old already, probably between 8 and 10 years old, and it's seen better days indeed. You can see that the pigment is starting to create little mountains and valleys, and this is a sure sign that the watercolor is no longer in a very great condition. Now, for example, I'm just going to not even activate the paint properly yet with water. I'm just going to go in and grab some water, and I'm just going to show you guys. It takes a minute to release its pigment before it really gets going, and then the water sort of seeps into this little cake and sits at the bottom. The problem is that the gum arabica is starting to sort of be used up with repeated wetting and using and painting, and some of these cakes are also quite contaminated. I actually think there's a little bit of mold on this particular cake as well. So I'm going to share with you guys a secret today all about honey, and you can use honey to just recondition your watercolor, and you can use it to completely recreate your watercolor. Now you might think, really, honey? But honey has been used for ages in watercolor, long before gum arabica, and if you really want to do this professionally, then I will suggest you go to the art supply store and get yourself a bottle of gum arabica, but brace yourself, it can be a bit expensive or pricey. And then you also need to invest in more tools, because to do this right, you literally have to dislodge the entire cake of dried up watercolor, and you need to grind it in a little bowl with a mortar and pestle until you've got a fine powder again. Then you add it on top of a glass sheet with one of those glass, what shall we call them, grinders, and you will add your gum arabica back to the powder watercolor, and you will work it on that glass sheet until you've got an even smooth consistency of a new watercolor paste, like it looks when you squeeze it out of the watercolor tube, and then you can put it back into your pan. So that's the long route. I'm going to show you today that you can recondition your watercolor pans by using a little bit of honey. So I did bring my honey from the kitchen. This is wildflower honey, cold extracted, non-irritated, 100% pure honey. Please don't use syrup or any chemical imitation of honey, because it's not going to do the same thing. You need 100%, preferably organic, non-irrigated, no additives added honey in order to do this exercise. Now, the first thing that I will suggest you do is just to use some clean water and go through each of your pans and really give it a good wash. Maybe the colors got a little bit contaminated during a painting process, so the best way is just to use two different buckets of water, the one for rinsing your brush and the other one with clean water to bring the clean water back to your pan, and then you just give it a good little gentle scrub. So we're just going to start to activate these paints and bring some water into it without drowning it in water. So I'm going to speed through this process for you guys, because I'm sure you don't want to sit for half an hour and see me clean watercolor pans. So here we go. Okay, so I have washed each of these little cakes and I've dispensed a little bit of honey just in a shooter glass for myself. Now I will suggest that you maybe grab a pipette just to dispense a drop of water into each of these watercolors, just to rehydrate them really, and allow the water just to seep into the color. Just helps to activate it and soften it a little bit. Oh, quivering in the morning. Trying not to overdo it. You can see I don't use the black a lot. Right, so then I will take a little brush. I'm just going to activate it with water. I'm going to take my shooter glass and I'm just going to dip the toe of my brush in some honey. And you can just literally massage it into your watercolor. Now, honey is naturally antibacterial and it attracts water. So it is like a natural gum arabica. It really just helps your watercolor stay fresh and has a beautiful body to it, and it prevents that grainy effect from happening, and it also prevents your watercolor from drying out to the state which these ones did. So it's a loving job, it's a patient job. You're just lovingly taking care of your watercolor paint so that when you paint, you can draw again on the strength of your pigment and it will respond beautifully. So go ahead and recondition your watercolor by using some honey. I think it's time to speed up this process with some magic. This magic is done. So I'm just basically going to leave my palette for a minute just to allow the honey and the clean water just to soak in a bit. But you can see that these pans look a lot more juicy now than they did when I first started this episode. Now I did recondition a few of my palettes yesterday in this kit. And I was so surprised when I came back later. This one looked even worse for tear. And like the neon colors, it really took a minute for me to get the pigment to release. Like I didn't do this one yet. So I really have to dig in there to try and get some of this paint to give to me. So it's there, but it's very translucent and it's not that potent at all. So I did recondition this one yesterday with a bit of honey and it's looking a lot better. So look at the difference. So it really just cooperates much faster. You get a beautiful strength of pigment and it should also improve its flow. And that means when you work with a lot of water, it should transition into that much easier. I also did it with this purple. Beautiful. I could barely paint with it yesterday because it just didn't want to respond. So let's go ahead and add some honey and just give it some joy there. And I'm going to just leave it alone. Beautiful. To just soak in there a little bit. So anyway, the bottom line is when your watercolor has dried out a bit, there are ways that you can save that watercolor. Remember, watercolor is water activated. So even if your tube or your pan has dried out completely, it gets reactivated with water. But the gum arabica in your paint could have dried out completely, or through repeated wetting and using could have been sort of depleted in your pan. And using honey can be a way to just replenish that beautiful gumminess about your watercolor that will help you to get your watercolor to work for you again the way that it worked the day that you bought it. So never throw old watercolor out. There's definitely a way to recondition it and get it to flow and to work for you again. So I hope that this tip was helpful for you as a beginner watercolorist. Do look at my playlist on my channel. There are a number of episodes available for you that will help you to get into this beautiful painting craft more easily and with a lot more success and happiness and lots of joy. And the magic has happened. Look at the difference in this beautiful watercolor kits. Now, I didn't buy a new one. I just cleansed it magically with soap and water. But this is a few hours later, and look at how juicy these wells of color are now looking. They are ready to roll. So I thought, let's do a quick painting with these beautiful colors and see how they paint. Let's see what happens. So I'm thinking just a simple little watercolor doodle. How's that? Falling over my tongue today. I'm so excited. But before we get into that watercolor doodle, I did want to just mention a few things. Remember that a lot of pigment in watercolor, in paint in general, can be toxic. So be very careful when you work with your watercolor that you don't put your brush in your mouth or that you don't eat or drink while you are painting. I think the biggest danger for us as artists is to dip your brush by accident in your tea because you're in a different world and then you drink your tea. So please be very mindful and careful that you put your food to the side or any drink so that you don't contaminate it with watercolor. I also just want to mention, if you are going to recondition your watercolors with honey, remember the ants love them honey too. So just put your kit away in an area that is covered and sealed so that it does not attract some critter visitors that maybe want to munch on your watercolor. I don't want you to open your watercolor and then see that a whole anthill has moved into your color zone. That would be disastrous. So do be mindful if your fingers get sticky. Don't lick it. It's definitely not food. It is meant for paper. Okay. So those are the more important sort of things that I did want to mention about this practice so that your safety is always number one priority. Right. So I just have a vision in my head of this beautiful, what shall we call it? Echina flowers. They are really beautiful and they have this lovely orangey head of a crown. So we'll just make a little bit of a mound. I'm going to rinse my brush. And we're going to get into these beautiful, I don't even know what this color is called. There's codes here that I can see for the first time in a long time. This is probably something like a vermilion or something. Something to that effect. Okay, let's make a puddle of color. There we go. I don't have one of these flowers in front of me, so I'm just imagining it. So you can see that the pigment is ready to flow and it's just beautiful. And this is really not my best watercolor paper. This is just that student grade paper that I'm not so mad about. I won't mention names. But this is sort of what I then use to just play and have some fun. I just love how these colors is now responding to me much faster because it's had time to rehydrate, and you can see that no harm was done with the honey. Right, let's try and get a little leaf going there. It's very basic, isn't it? But that's okay. That's okay. We are just playing. Oh, multiple stems for this leaf. Okay, let's try to make another friend here somewhere. Maybe at the top there's space. Let's get a cooler color for some of them in the background. I feel that needs to be brought in as well. I haven't painted with this kit for more than a year, so it's really fun to see how a reconditioning can have such a beautiful impact. I think I'm just going to leave it at that. Maybe another leaf here somewhere. Doesn't have to be connected always. We're just playing. I don't know. Just want to add some color in the background and just do some diffusing. This is that paper that doesn't like a lot of color, a lot of water I mean. So we'll just break this up a little bit here and there and just give it a bit of a loose vibe. The important thing is that our watercolor is functional again. It's looking much better. I was able to push down some of these mountains of color that started to form because it was cracking and it was sort of heaving up like that. And now that there's some honey in there and some clean water, I was able to just mold it back into its shape. And I find that the pigment is much more responsive and ready for a beautiful painting. So if you've got an old watercolor set lying around and you think it's really tired and grainy and it doesn't work so well anymore, you don't have to throw it away. You can recondition it and use that kit for, the stuff that you want to practice and just play around with and the not so serious painting sessions, and before long you will realize that your watercolor is always ready to play along. So I really hope that this lesson was helpful for you as a beginner in watercolor, to know that you can recondition old watercolor and get it to perform at its peak efficiency again by simply using honey. So I'll see you guys in another episode, and stay creative. Bye bye for now.